Add to that the statements by some armed terrorist groups, which also indicate that they succeeded previously in bringing shipments into Syria, including American Stinger rockets, anti-aircraft rockets, at a time when a high-level official in the Libyan Provisional Council has announced that 5,000 anti-aircraft missiles have been misplaced or lost from the Libyan arsenals. And there have been statements that Turkey and Libya have cooperated with other states, Arab and non-Arab, in sending lethal weapons to armed groups in Syria to spread death and destruction. It is strange that this ship has crossed into Lebanese territorial water through Egypt and has passed by the positions of the maritime units of UNIFIL without any interdiction from these units. Mr. President, joint understandings to conspire to send weapons and smuggle it into Syria and to facilitate the crossing of terrorists into Syria are in contradiction with any political solution of the crisis in Syria and do not lead at all towards facilitating or supporting the resolutions of the Security Council or Mr. Kofi Annan's plan. In fact, they merely constitute an attempt to assassinate Mr. Annan's mission, and they constitute also a blatant attack on Syrian sovereignty. A week ago, this esteemed council, in a session chaired by the President of the Republic of Azerbaijan, has reaffirmed in its presidential statement the strong and unequivocal denunciation and condemnation of terrorism in all its forms and manifestations, regardless of their perpetrators, its location, and its purposes. And from this rostrum, we are calling upon your esteemed council to translate these words into deeds and to take immediate actions and immediate necessary actions in order to stop all terrorist activities taking place in Syria and to exert maximum pressure on the states which are facilitating and financing and inciting the groups that are perpetrating this terrorism, in order for us to comply with the Security Council resolutions, both those dealing with terrorism and with Syria. Terrorist acts, Mr. President, have cost us precious blood of our people. There will come a day when we shall hold accountable all those who took part in these activities, who incited them, who financed them, or facilitated their commitment. Terrorism is an international crime that requires an international response. This was the gist of the statement of all members of the Council. Accordingly, combating terrorism cannot be selective or relative or subjective. It must match deeds to words. We also call upon the Security Council committees for the implementation of resolutions 1267, 1989, and 1373 to fulfill their tasks and mandates in order to implement the substance of these resolutions in relation to the events in Syria. Mr. President, the terrorist activities taking place in Syria now, which target the stability of the state and the nation and the society, are no less dangerous than the terrorist activities that targeted New York on September 11th, and the terrorist activities that targeted Madrid and London. There is no righteous terrorism and malicious terrorism. There is only one terrorism that must be combated. It is the terrorism that targets Syria is the same one that targets New York, London, Madrid, and other cities. There is also media terrorism, and there is cultural terrorism, and there is political terrorism, and economic terrorism. All of that is terrorism. It is not sufficient for a member state in this international organization to finance the creation of a center for counterterrorism, while at the same time it stands behind the incitement for the perpetration of terrorism in my country and the financing of terrorism groups in my country. Terrorism is one and the same. Finally, Mr. President, terrorism throughout the world is caused primarily by Zionist terrorism, which was initiated by Israel much earlier in the life of this international organization. Back in the 50s, Israel kidnapped the first civilian aircraft. For the first time in the world, it was a Syrian aircraft in 1954, the first time that a civilian aircraft was hijacked. That was carried out by Israel in 1954. And then Israel carried out a series of terrorist activities that you are well aware of and which led to the displacement of millions of Palestinians from their homes. The sequence of Israeli terrorism has continued to this day. The words that you heard from the speaker who spoke just before me was merely a diversion to divert attention from Israeli terrorism, the sole purpose of which is to undermine the possibility of establishing a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza, and to focus attention on other issues away from the state terrorism of terrorism, which is well evidenced, documented in thousands of documents issued by the United Nations in New York and in Geneva. Thank you, Mr. President.
The representative of Syrian Arab Republic, and now I give the floor to the representative of Australia.